girl. How you feeling? Well, you know, staying hydrated, meditating, getting some sun, touching some grass, scratching the grass, all that. All the things. All the things. All the things. I hear that. This is Black Writer Doula Sessions, and I am Ella Shawn, your story doula and unlicensed therapist. It's a girl, Ella. This micro podcast is part of the Black Writer Therapy podcast platform, made possible by listeners like you on the Alive Podcast Network. Every week, Black women writers receive 10 to 15 minutes of direct somatic informed support for those moments unique to our experience in the writing industry. Each session is an answer to my favorite question. I got you, Ella. I got you. How you healing, sister? Yeah. How you healing, sister? Yeah. Yeah. How you healing, my sister? Yeah. How you healing, sis? Is that it? Did I get that? Okay. I think that's a wrap. I feel good about that. Hello, this is Ella Shawn. I am so excited to announce that we have Freda J. Day. She is one of 10 children raised in debilitating poverty. Her memoir doesn't shy away from scandal, tragedy, or combative marriage. Instead, she weaves a testimony of faith and resilience. Published in 2005, From the Greenleaf to the Greener Pastures is a sprawling 492-page account of her journey to survival. In 2023, her story resurfaced in a new light with the release of the Greenleaf saga, a copyright infringement lawsuit, Day versus Oprah. Yes, that Oprah. An Amazon-published ebook recounting her legal battles for recognition. Freda, welcome to Black Writer Therapy Podcast. I am so excited to have you here finally because, well, you and I know what it took to be here, right?
Exactly. And I'm so happy to finally get to chat with you because your Black Therapy podcast, it just stood out for me. It was just seemed like it was on the go, and it was something that it would give me the opportunity to get my story out there. And it seems like you've worked with a lot of other Black female writers and individuals who've had some powerful stories and expressions to share. So I said, that sounds like something I need to do.
Well, I'm so glad you chose my podcast to come on. Honestly, it's dedicated to Black women writers because I feel like if we don't create spaces for ourselves and each other, nobody else is going to do that, right? Like not genuinely. So we have to be the ones to do it. So I'm glad you found the little old podcast that could and sent me out a little email. So before we get started talking about law and legacy and all the things, I want to just kind of ask a warm-up question. What's the very first story you remember telling to anyone?
My book or about my previous experiences?
Just the very first story, like the first time you told the story to someone, not to be published, not to be seen as a storyteller or a writer, but just for the love of telling the story.
I think it started in college, when I attended the University of South Carolina, and I knew I wanted to be a writer. Well, I knew from a very young age, but it was there that I started sharing my ideas and expressing my story interests in college. And one of my professors that had a huge impact on me, she was the one that said, I see some talent there and you have some very good storytelling abilities. And I said, it basically started out with reflecting upon my younger years and some of the stories that my mother shared with me. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was when I started taking my writing more seriously in between trying to hold a full-time job and trying to raise a family at the time.
Mm. And still in college?
And still in college. So it seems like all my life I've had to really struggle, but in the midst of all those obstacles, I managed to persevere and continue. But I know that that love of writing was innate and it was something that I wasn't going to give up on. So I found a lot of my writing, short stories and experiences was more therapeutic for me.
Wow. Okay. I love that because that brings me to my favorite question. And I ask every guest this. It is, I think paramount that at least once a day somebody we ask ourselves, how are you healing right now?
And the best form of healing, other than thinking about your past memories and things that have impacted the way that you grow and develop, is pretty much putting it down on paper. And
Mm-hmm.
once you put it down on paper, it's like a release. And it's something that, of course, that you can naturally go back and reflect on, and you can see where you started and where you ended up
Yep.
at. And all that definitely ties into giving you the ability to go for it because you can look back on what you've written on paper. I mean, as we become integrated with so much going on around our lives, sometimes you forget those little intricate moments when you didn't think that you could get through a certain scenario and you had written it down on paper, and you can go back to that paper and reflect on, well, I got through that. So I can move on to bigger, better things. When you thought that at that moment you were ready to throw in the towel, and if you've written it on paper, it's definitely a time where you can reflect just by looking back on what you encountered and how you endured and how you were able to move forward despite those setbacks.
I love that yeah, healing through writing. I always say it's the one medium that allows me to know what I'm thinking for real because I can't lie when I'm on the paper. Like I cannot lie on the page.
Right, exactly.
Like I can lie to myself all
Right.
day, every day, and I can probably lie to everybody else too, really, really good. But I cannot lie on the page. And so, yeah,
Right.
that is a very important part
Exactly.
of healing. Yeah. Thank you. I
You're
love
welcome.
that.
Well,
I love that.
it's so true. I mean, and you would know firsthand. And it's just, yeah, it's so true. And I think a lot of people that tell these stories, it's the only way that they process life.
Amen to that. And that's the thing, right? I've had writers on my show that write nonfiction, that write, fiction, songs they just every gambit of the writer. And it is always a pouring out of what was for them and what could possibly be for them and everybody else that ends up getting on the page.
Right. And at the time, it was pretty much when I know a lot of my stories were to inspire others. And sometimes, though I may not have had the most prolific sales,
Mhm.
um, with some of my books, I would tell myself, well, if I was able to inspire just one person to move forward, then I've made an accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The accomplishment is in writing the book and getting it out there. People don't understand how few people say, oh, I want to write a book. I want to
Mhm.
write a book. And they keep saying it and they may even get started. But to actually write the book, complete the
Right,
book, do all the things, and then publish the book is the accomplishment because not everybody can do that. Right.
right. That's true. True. Everyone has a great story to tell, but to take the time to put it down on paper and to put your ideas together, it can somewhat be a challenge.
Yes, especially in these times when everything is moving at the speed of light, it seems like writing is one of those things that requires you to slow down,
Ex-
sit down with yourself, with your thoughts, with all the things, and actually put, pen to paper and spend time with you and your thoughts. And everybody's moving like this.
Right, with the technology and all. And which technology makes it easier for us to write certain things, but there's so much on your computers and your iPhones and your cell phones. There's so much information being thrown at you. Yeah, we'll find the times.
Yep, yep,
Exactly.
that's it. So
Yeah.
you write memoirs and inspirational nonfiction, I'm assuming, or do you write fiction as well?
Yes, I've written some story. I've written a story called "The Man in My Dreams," which was a fictional story as well. And I'm currently working on a nonfiction sci-fi story entitled "Don't Blame the Aliens."
Oh my
Big
gosh.
news these days. I mean, I know it's everywhere these days, or it's more coming into reality that there actually may be aliens out there somewhere. So I've just sometimes I like to steer away from nonfiction and invoke more of my creative talents, and that's what I'm currently working on right now.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Seriously, let me know if you need somebody to read for you.
Okay, sounds good. We'll
Seriously, sci-fi is
let
one of my favorite genres. And so what I'm hearing is don't tell me what kind of writer I am. I am a multi-genre writer and I write what I want when I want to write it.
right, exactly.
There
Yes.
you go. There you go. I love this. I love it. So let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes, right? Because my word, look, I was trying to go slow. I really was.
It's okay. So,
Yes, your memoir from the Greenleaf to Greener Pastures. And I mean, really, it's raw, right? You write very much this is what it was, this is how it happened, things like that. Why did you feel so compelled to put those experiences on paper?
well, particularly because I knew that there were other female women that were out there having some of the same experiences that I was having. And I wanted them to see how I took on those challenges. And at some points, I just wanted to give up. But just from listening to my other members of my community and other individuals out there that shared their life experiences with me, it helped me grow. Because when I first wrote that memoir, fairly young in my 20s, and I mean, some of my life experiences started from that book that during the period when I was in my early 20s, and just I had I had integrated other stories from other adults as well, because a lot of their stories that they shared with me helped me to grow and get through some of those experiences. So therefore, I was more encouraged to write about them, because other than the fact that I said it was therapeutic and it helped me get through some of those experiences, I wanted to share them with other women or other individuals that were going through trying times with their family members or their spouse, or even just rearing a family. And I thought that that would be so instrumental in the types of stories that people wanted to hear at that time.
Okay. Can you share a little bit about your experience for the listening audience who may not have read the book or maybe not even heard of the book, right? So, can you share a few of those experiences with the audience?
Sure. Some of those experiences started with going through what I called was a broken marriage, in which I was pretty much the primary income. I was bringing in most of the income. And I was also dealing with a husband that was very conflicted with life. And he was going through alcohol abuse. And I had to still be strong for my children at the time,
Mhm.
that they were seeing the symptoms and they were going through, even though they had two parents in the household, um, they weren't from a broken situation, but the home was very dysfunctional.
Mhm.
And I had to do things. like make sure they got to school, although I was married and there was a husband there. I was the one that they looked up to, and I had to be an example for them. And then some of the stories was me going through was my experience of being a college student trying to better myself, since obviously my husband wasn't trying to at the time. I had to work two jobs. I was working in the hospital and trying to work nights, but still work nights and get up early in the morning and attend college. And although I wanted to throw in the towel, I managed to graduate. And then there were stories of growing up as a sibling in a family of 10. And out of that family of 10, my mother, because my father passed away when I was very young, she was trying to raise 10 children. And at the time, it was a struggle for her, but we bonded together, and our home was not totally dysfunctional because we all worked together as a family. And my older siblings were very helpful with rearing us in the right way, and we all turned out to be pretty good. We weren't the best, we weren't perfect, but we were a very strong, united group of siblings. Although it was 10 of us, we all looked up for each other, and we came from a one-parent household. And I'll talk about some of those experiences and how just having that supportive family, although we didn't come from a lot, but my mother, we were all in one household. We never moved around, and how my older brothers were able to step in and help the younger set of siblings.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those experiences got me through some very difficult situations as we were going through high school and moving on.
Yeah.
And I guess experiences of, having just it was four sisters, it was four of us, and how although we only had my mother in the home, we were able to grow up in a similar fashion, and we all ended up getting married, but we all tended in the long run, other than my baby sister, I think, to end up with men that shared similar lifestyles. So that was just
Gotcha.
stories that pretty much stem from how you start out and where you end up. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it is inherited, but a lot of things we inherit, we have to develop the ability to not let it define us.
That part, like what you just said was such a kind of mic drop moment. Like my four sisters and I, right? It was four of
Right.
you with including you,
Right.
and then six brothers. Wow. Yeah, and all of you except the baby sister married men with similar personality profiles. And so, yeah, that's very telling because, again, like you said, it's almost like some epigenetic code that is kind of predisposing like you to this kind of relationship. And yeah, was your father in the same mode?
Actually, he was. He was an alcoholic, but it was just kind of strange how it all happened because he was the same way, but we lost him at such an early age. I mean, I was only, as I wrote about it in my book, I was around 4, very young. And also I wrote into my book, which was very similar to was the story, the actual show Greenleaf. There was a sibling, there was actually, which I forgot, she was an infant that died of pneumonia. She would have been the oldest if she had lived.
Okay.
And I wrote about that and how it was similar to a scene in Greenleaf.
I want to have an understanding of how you were able to write so openly and plainly about all the things. And what you just said, I think, is so important. I don't want to harp on it, but it's so important because you were like, I was 4 years old when my father passed away. And yet you ended up marrying someone who had a similar profile.
So genetics is pretty deep, or it's something inherent in just, how we mimic our parents somewhere, sometime in our lives. It's so true because even though he wasn't an intricate part of our family for the girls as we were growing up, it's just very ironic how we ended up marrying men that resembled our father.
Yeah, I know. I have my own thoughts on all of that. And so, since this is my podcast, I'm sharing because Black women are healers. We are natural healers, and we are drawn to people who need healing, almost to our own detriment. Do you feel it? That tug? The one whispering, it's time to finally tell your story. At Southern Momentum Publishing House, we know that tug well. It's the start of something bigger. Your voice, your truth, your power on the page. Whether it's been years in the making or just an idea waiting to blossom, we are here to help you take the leap. No excuses, no waiting, just momentum. Visit us today at somopubhouse.org and start your next chapter now.
That says a lot right there in a nutshell, because we don't realize it, but as you just stated, it is very inherent.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Well, thank you for sharing this. What's the Greenleaf?
Greenleaf was a cafe that was owned by my father during the early 19th on up into the 60s, and it was run by him during a time when, I guess during that period, is some people called the Black Wall Street. However, it was in the South. So there were a lot of Black men during my father's time that was up and coming. They were doing good things. They were building their communities. They were working or creating their own businesses. And he had his own cafe during that period of time entitled the Greenleaf Cafe, or he just called it Greenleaf.
My.
The restaurant.
And where was it located?
And it was located downtown Columbia off of, what's that street now? It was closer to the university area.
Washington?
Yeah, somewhere along that area.
That's where all the Black businesses were.
Yeah, and he was a part of that. And I had the street because I was doing an ancestry. I was on ancestry.com doing some research, and I had the exact name of the street. I'm pretty sure it's Washington because it was the address and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that, well, when we were in court, it wasn't when I had that battle of copyright infringement, the judge didn't ask me the exact street, but now that you mention Washington, I think it was Washington. Right. And it was, I know that my mother, she shared those stories with me all the time about how African Americans, Black people in that area during that time were very progressive. And like I said, my father was instrumental in owning his own Greenleaf Cafe at the time. And she would always share stories with us about it. That's why I became so.
Just found it.
Oh, you did? Yes, early in the morning. I can't remember the exact name. So my mom would share all the stories with me all the time. And a lot of things, well, as you can see, a lot of stories that my mom shared with me, being the oldest girl at the time, just stuck with me. Because some of my older brothers would say, Freda, how do you remember all that stuff? And I was like, it was just there. It was just embedded in my brain at the time. And
Wow. Your father's
I
restaurant was in the Green Book, like of places where it was safe to stop and eat.
right, exactly. Oh, you did very good research. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I guess when the story Greenleaf came up, I was like, what? Where did it come from all of a sudden? But, it was like as we dug deeper and deeper into it, it's like, yeah, that was the one and only at the time. And I do remember even at an early age, him being in the restaurant, him cooking and preparing for his customers. I remember him cooking in our house that was on Laurel Street and taking
Mm-hmm.
stuff back to the restaurant. And Laurel Street was at the time in Columbia, close to, not far from Two Notch Road, where you had to go. Two Notch Road was very long during that period. But I remember
Yeah.
cooking. I remember all the cooking and him preparing dishes or preparing meals for his clients.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So
So I'm like, I want that book. Can we get the fact that that your family has this legacy of like being on Black Wall Street down here in South Carolina, in Columbia, on Washington, Black downtown. That's amazing. Now I got to go back to the museum because there was an exhibit. Anyway,
what's that? Now, see, you've told me something.
yeah, they had a whole exhibit on Black Wall Street here in Columbia, and it was all along Washington Street, where historic Waverly and like Eva Perez neighborhood, all of those places, and then all the businesses. And so I have to go back now and see if they have Greenleaf restaurant there, because that's very interesting to me. I'm kind of a history buff, and so that's neat. Okay, because I was wondering where Greenleaf came from, and so now that makes a lot of sense. Let's get
Right.
to this story. Let's go.
Sure.
I'm going to just ask the one question, and then I'm going to let you do your thing. When you
Okay.
saw Greenleaf on TV,
Right.
okay, I don't even remember what year that it started
Uh,
showing.
2016 was the first aired.
Okay, so you see this show about this church situation and this family, and what made you say that looks like my story?
Exactly. Right. At first, I didn't have any idea about the Greenleaf story. My younger sister that lives in Atlanta, where Tyler Perry and all that group do a lot of their productions, she heard about it and she said, Frida, there's a story that's out called Greenleaf. And they've been advertising it here in Atlanta, Georgia, because that's where she resides. She said it sounded kind of interesting, almost like your book, because she had my book. And she said, you may want to check it out. When it actually aired here in North Carolina, I was just mesmerized with the first episode, because the first episode just struck me so, I was so surprised, because the first episode, there was the four girls, and there was the mansion and all the yeah, they came from a rich town, but it was in the South. It wasn't
Mhm.
in South Carolina. But what first struck me was how they were going to the first episode, where Grace and her daughter, which was interesting because Grace was an inspiring journalist, as I was, and as I wrote about in the book, that had a teenage daughter named Zora, as I had a teenage daughter at the time named Ashley. Ashley was very rebellious, and so was Zora. But that isn't what stood out. What stood out was the death of her sister Faith in a pond, and they were reciting from the Greenleaf to the they were reciting about, first they started off talking about how she had drowned in the pond, and it was not far from their estate. And the first thing I thought about was how I had wrote about my grandmother's death, which was in a pond on their large farm.
Oh.
And the drowning there, um, they were reciting the 23rd Psalm, which was, "As I lay in greener pastures." And I remember writing about how we had ran through the corn pastures up to the pond because everybody was trying to find my grandmother that had died in that pond that was not far from their estate. And the other factor was how they all lived in this mansion at the time and how rich and well off they were at. And I remember how I wrote about not my grandparents that lived on that huge farm. There was my Aunt Frances that I wrote about prior to the farm, that she lived in this pretty much rich at that time. She owned this huge boarding house where a lot of well-known artists and stuff would come to my she was my great great aunt, my mother's Aunt Frances. I wrote about in the book, and how she was brought up in this wealthy society,
Mm.
owned this boarding house, and a lot of people that were well known during that period of time come there, and how my mother was exposed to that. So it started off talking about how my mother was actually surrounded by her wealthy relatives. And all that was in it, even in the first episode, how they talked about Bob Skanks and his political involvement. And a lot of my stories were about my husband that was also in politics, trying to pursue a job as, at the time he's running for city councilman. So all those little factors, it was like the so-called creator at the time was looking through the book and just picking certain scenarios that were very similar to what I'd written about in the book. And although when we went to court, they were like, the Greenleaf was about an uncle of the bishop, James, at the time, that was a serial molester. I was like, the Greenleaf, the drama consisted of various stories. All of them were not connected to one plot or theme, and a lot of their stories were juggled from little aspects of different segments that were in my book that I put together, which was clearly like every time it was as if the person that claimed he created the show or wrote the show, because we never could define who exactly wrote it. I mean, there was the Oprah's version that she met with this creator who was a Puerto Rican. And we know that Puerto Ricans wouldn't be that heavily influenced with what goes on in an African American or the Black community.
Mm-mm.
It was like little segments, like the drowning in the pond and the wealthy background for Black people at the time, and this being a wealthy family in their estate. And then there were characters such as Grace and her confidant. Like Grace had a confidant named Trigger Happy David Nelson. And in my book, I had someone I confided in whose name was Happy David Nelson. So it was a lot of names and different.
Wait a minute. Let me go back to this. Grace's confidant was the
Happy David Nelson, but there was a character in my book called Happy David Nelson. So when you go to court, there are like things like titles and the fact that your book was about sinners and Christians and Greenleaf was about a whole community of sinners and Christians. Things like that couldn't be technically referred to. Similarities could not. And even though there was a great bit of substantial similarities, when you're dealing with copyright infringement, a lot of that stuff is not enough evidence. No matter how, you can have a ton of similarities, but you have to actually show more than similarities to prove access. In my first hearing, with those 100 similarities and presented them to the judge, and that's why the case was never really fully dismissed, because it was never dismissed. The hearing went on because of all those substantial similarities, and over percent of them were the exact names, similar names.
Huh? But what do you have to have? Like that's the question, right? Because as an indie author,
mm-hmm.
right, when we publish our work and we do the copyright, and even if we don't like do the, or what they call the poor man's copyright, where you just write your copyright, send yourself a copy of the book, and then that's it. Regardless, it's still your intellectual property, and it's still protected under U.S. copyright laws. So what do you have to have if you have 100 instances where things came directly from your prose, and
Right.
it's pretty obvious, right? I mean, from the title to like Happy Donald Nelson or David Nelson, right? Like, so what do you have to have?
Well, their primary argument was that could she have actually, with the Greenleaf and the statement Oprah had made at the time about her drama show Greenleaf moving on to Greener Pastures, which was actually stated in the court when the judge was like,
wait a minute. wait. I'm just trying to get this right.
She had made a statement in an article that I presented in court where she said she would hope that her show, entitled The Greenleaf, would move on to Greener Pastures. And I was like, that in itself, I was stating to the judge, that in itself shows some type of clarity that she had access to the book, that she actually read the book. And of course, her attorneys were like, well, if she actually said that. And I said, well, it was written in the Milwaukee Journal, a statement in which, yeah, Oprah has affiliation with so many newspapers and articles. Yeah, he would have to prove that she actually said it. And at the time, he was like, he hadn't seen the article. But their strongest argument was, did she actually have the book? You have to prove access. And I said, there is going to be a problem with that, because I mailed a copy to Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry. And both of them received the books. I even had a conversation with Tyler Perry's secretary at the time. And I asked her about it, and she said, well, we don't keep those unsolicited manuscripts. We mailed them back. I said, that was an actual book that was sent to your office, and it was never returned to my address. So it was in you all's possession. I also sent the same thing to Oprah Winfrey.
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, how can you prove it? And the one thing that still haunts me today is that those two receipts where they give you the postal receipt from the post office showing that you mailed it and they received it. I could see that they received it because I could type in the serial number that were on the postal receipts and pull up that it arrived at her office. When I pulled it up, it was evident that they received it. That's when I telephoned the office. But those two key pieces of evidence, those postal receipts, were put into a storage bin 3 years prior to my actual trial date, and they were disposed of.
You couldn't get anything from the post office?
Went to the post office several times, and they were like, we get thousands of pieces of mails all the time. I had even tried to contact the postal general master.
The postmaster general?
Postmaster general, right. I even tried to contact him, but I did not receive any type of cooperation from them. And those two receipts, even when I would talk to attorneys, some of them would say, you have so much information. I mean, I had attorneys taking interest, but they really wanted those receipts. And I was like, that cannot be the brunt of not getting the full recognition for writing that book, or that my work has been stolen, which I would have, it was like a lot of stuff came on as the trial went on. That's why it went on for so long. But it was those two, it all started out with those two key pieces of evidence that they wanted me to present to them to actually show that she received the book, it was in her possession, and that is what her trial attorneys were so focused on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
However, they wanted to make the case about Oprah when the case was about the so-called creator, Craig Wright, the Puerto Rican writer, that they sort of eased him out of the picture. So the focus would be more on Oprah Winfrey. And then Oprah had so many different variations as to how she came about with the story. And when we went to court, he said that he got the story Greenleaf from this novel by Some O'Flannery.
Flannery O'Connor?
Right. that was, but we could not find any connection to that story being anything about similar to the drama Greenleaf at all. But he sort of eased his way out of it, trying to reference something that he wrote that had nothing to do with the Greenleaf drama. It was, which you were having trial hearings through Zoom at the time, because all this took place starting in 2019, but then our first
pandemic.
Yeah, during the pandemic, we had trial hearings through Zoom. And it was just so many things that came up that the judge had to question. Were these attorneys actually honest about a lot of things? Even down to a simple thing, something as simple as they said they only had one copy of the book and they had to order it online. But as it turned out, Library of Congress, which that's how we all copyright and protect all of our works. That's the best way to do it. So they had the original copy of my work. The original copy of my work is what, it was a lot of things in that work that could prove they had to have had access to my work, because there were certain things in the original copy that I submitted to the Copyright Office that wasn't in the book. So if they knew about it, they had to have had access to the original copy.
Wow.
So the attorneys were denying that they never gained access to the original copy. So for a year, or close to 2 years, I was trying to get the original copy. The Copyright Office was saying that they couldn't find my original copyright. That throughout the pandemic, they didn't. So the entire time that they were putting me on hold and I needed the original copy to present to the judge in court, they were claiming that they couldn't find it. However, I later discovered through research and my constantly contacting the Library of Congress that they had released an original copy of my book when the trial first started to Oprah's attorneys. But they
What?
the whole time, right? They were telling me the whole time that they couldn't find the copy. It was misplaced. So throughout my later research, I found out just through research, and I had documentation that they had received an original copy of my book.
Does that even work when it's your book?
Yeah. So that was exactly, Vicki, that's what I'm saying. It was just so many little things that would come up and down, but it was just, I didn't have the $20,000 for, even though I had attorneys that were interested, and one was a female, I'll never forget, she wanted to even work out a payment arrangement so that she could represent me. And then she later contacted me prior to our first trial to say there was a conflict of interest. Apparently someone, well, this was prior to our trial when she had actually agreed to work with me. She found out that there was a conflict of interest with OWN Network, which was a company that Oprah owned. So little things would come up then. That is how I ended up being the lone fighter against copyright infringement, because things would come up at the last minute once I thought I had secured a reputable attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just back and forth, back and forth. And the trial pretty much went on for almost 4 years.
And that's what I want to get to next. Right. So I've been listening and jotting down notes, and the crazy English teacher in me is over here researching Flannery O'Connor's Greenleaf. I think I've read that short story. She's one of my favorite Southern writers.
Right.
So I was like, that's about a dairy farm. I'm looking at that. It's about a dairy farm. And I vaguely remember, poverty, yes. In the South, of course, because she's from Georgia. Not a dairy farmer.
Right. But that was the story he had told Oprah's attorney. He did not have the knowledge or the ability to write about what the experiences I had as a Black woman. When Oprah's attorney started asking questions, and I just said, well, I'm going to plead the fifth. That's when they wanted to go into a summary judgment. And for attorneys, that's massive for an attorney, because they could write, they know that I'm not an attorney. They could write and impose certain things that would make it difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of the jury trial. And it would be easier to grant a summary judgment just through writing, just through documentation. And when I started pleading the fifth, because I knew things weren't right and I wasn't answering things, that's when it was more easier for the judge to make a decision based on a summary judgment, because it's mass documentation, though we went almost a year with documentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in this lawsuit, what were you truly seeking? Like accountability, justice?
Yeah, I was definitely wanting my accreditation. I wasn't able to ever get my copy. Vicki, guess when my copy actually showed up?
Once the trial had been dismissed?
Right, like the day that I received the decision.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I have a lot of distrust with that organization.
Mm-hmm.
I see with all the craziness that's going on in the world, even though these federal organizations and the federal government as a whole are supposed to do what's right, it's not. And when they were suppressing my evidence, I had to actually go a step further than the Copyright Office. I had to go to the Freedom of Information Act and contact them. And then that pretty much expedited the process, but I still didn't get anything until the original copies until after the entire trial ordeal.
So I'm going to ask you real quick, do you think the legal system is designed to protect the everyday man and woman, our intellectual property rights, our rights, period? Do you think, in your opinion, and after having gone through this entire ordeal, do you think that our legal system is designed for the everyday person, or is it kind of a playground for those who have deep pockets and influence?
Right. You nailed it. No, it's not implemented for us to succeed or to excel. The legal system, there's definitely blind justice, and it's definitely geared toward those that don't have the financial resources.
Mm-hmm.
It started out that way, and it continues to be that way, and it's definitely that way when you're playing Russian roulette with billionaires.
Yep. Gosh, that's whoa. Another mic drop moment, right? When you're playing Russian roulette with billionaires and you went up against the billionaire, right?
Right.
Like
So
you went up against the billionaire and sending her your book. I'm just saying this, right? If she got the book, read the book, liked the book, wanted to do something with the book, why not
just
do
acknowledge.
right by the writer? Girl, can we
Right.
talk?
Exactly. If you're the person that you have put out there for years as being so a big advocate of wanting to empower women, and you want to send a message that you represent the average Black female that's trying to do succeed in life and just telling her story, and if you wanted to use it, just ask.
Yes. And be like, girl, come on. We have stuff to do. We have work to do.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was shocked. And the fact that I even mentioned her in my book just
Yeah.
so
Yeah. All of the, I'm not have to use the words, right? Alleged, the alleged copyright infringement on the part of Oprah, because I'm not trying to get sued. So the alleged copyright infringement on the part of Oprah left you having to defend yourself, not getting any assistance from lawyers or the court system or other federal institutions.
exactly.
And so then you're left with what? And
Oh,
what happened after you were in court for 4 years,
right,
back and forth, and finally the court says we're going to dismiss this because your themes are not copyrightable. These
right.
aren't themes. These are
I,
moments from your life that you
right.
chose to share.
That bothered me the most. That it was.
Uh-huh.
I put so much time and effort into writing these things because it was just therapeutic for me, and I knew that it could make a big impact on the lives of other people and be uplifting. And then for her to just sort of have that taken from me, not Oprah in general, but
Hmm.
my theory is that she had the book and she brought it to him
Mm.
because she wanted to boost her ratings. And when he was asked how he created the Flannery was probably the only Greenleaf reference he could come up with. Or maybe someone told him, who knows what they do in Hollywood? But I mean, well, we know what they do, but saying it was all, everything was all threefold. And I'm
Yeah.
not a pun, that's threefold with the three individuals I knew had some involvement.
So what
And
do you want readers to take away from this? What do you want independent to take away from your experience?
I want them to know that if they want to take their writing further, when you try to put your work out there and send it out there to screenwriters, and you gotta like do more than just hold on to every ounce of evidence or every, you just got to do more than the average copyright process. When you
Hmm.
start putting your work out there, you might want to share it with someone you trust, or don't lose any form of documentation. You can only trust yourself.
Hmm.
And when you're putting your work out there, even submitting it to, organized and professional or deemed organized and professional publishers, you still have to go beyond, especially uh, Black writers. You have to just take those extra measures in protecting your works, because to make sure you get that accreditation, because just like we've always had to work 10 times harder to do the same job that someone of another race or another someone with another degree of status, we sometimes have to work 10 times harder to prove ourselves. You're going to have to do that when you're writing your own ideas and you're putting your work out there. You still have to find a standard or way of, you have to go that extra length.
Yeah.
Keep your work and make it yours, even if you, because sometimes having it copyrightable and going through the process of having it going through the due process of copywriting your work, sometimes it takes a little bit more than that.
Wow. I think my last question is, let's say I am Oprah. And because she was never present in any of this, right? She never showed up to court. She sent lawyers, representatives, and things of that nature.
Right, because and one time she was actually in Charlotte at the time. So I thought that was very But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Your show. I'm serious, it's your show. But I want you to, I'm Oprah. What would you have said? What do you want to say to Oprah? Like, in all honesty, because
Yeah. Well,
Black woman in America, if one time or another, look up to Oprah, idolize Oprah for her come up, right? Then you've been under a rock somewhere, because I mean, she came from where she came from, and now she's like this big mogul. So knowing that at some point you had this level of respect for her and you looked up to her, obviously, because you sent her your book and you're like, hey, I want you to see what I did, right?
Right.
And she allegedly received the book, but there's no proof of that. And I have to keep using the word allegedly. She allegedly liked the book enough to contract someone to turn it into a screenplay and then turn it into a TV series. And again, all of this is alleged. So what do you want to say to her? I am Oprah. What do you want to say to her? What would you have said to her if she showed up in court one day when you were going through this really heinous process?
Simply, why didn't I matter?
Yeah, those are good. Why didn't I matter? Like, to open that up, why didn't I, the individual person who wrote the book, why didn't I matter?
Yeah.
Wow. Look, I'm going to say this. I'm no attorney. And I don't know much about the legal system here. I try not to get involved with it, in all honesty.
Right.
But I will say this, as an independent publisher, I understand copyright. I understand intellectual property rights. I understand the importance of making sure you're doing everything you can to protect yourself. As an independent writer, I understand the labor and the hardship and the blood and the sweat and the tears and the crazy that go into writing a book, especially a memoir, right? Because that's not fiction. That is like, this is my life.
Exactly.
Have your life reduced to themes that aren't copyrightable, like that is violence and that is violation. It's what it feels like to me. It's violent. Those words, ma'am, you cannot copyright themes.
Right.
You have my life reduced to themes. That is violation. That is violent. It is visceral. Like, you take all of me and tell me that I'm just a collection of 5 themes.
Right. Exactly. Right.
What?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's how it took me a long time. And I still think I'm trying to deal with the emotions I felt at that time. And a lot of stuff, I was down a lot, even going through the court ordeal. But I think the only person that kept me going at the time was my pen pal, and that's another story, from the south of France. And she was also going through a similar battle with another major film industry at the time. In that book, I have a lot of our, but yeah, it was pretty demeaning, the entire
Yeah.
the entire thing.
Yeah. I can see that. There's definitely a moment, I think, when you realize, okay, I'm not going to get anywhere with this. I'm going to have to eat this. But also, I think you were extremely brave to do what you did, in all honesty, to go up against the giant, right?
It was definitely a David and Goliath.
That's it. I was trying to think of the thing's name. I was like, Gollum? No, it's not it. Goliath. It was like going up against Goliath with just your slingshot. And like, I don't even think you had the slingshot because you didn't even have the attorney. Like, you went in there on your own and you had this thing going for 4 years. And I think for that, you are to be commended because I mean, if you know or if you feel that you've been slighted or there has been injustice and someone has done something to infringe upon your rights, like to go and see it through by yourself.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, that definitely. This whole thing has been uplifting, and thanks for saying that. And I still feel like the fight is not over. I really do because
It might not be because I say this, and I mean this with all my heart. Karma, the law of compensation, is a real situation. And whatever you're putting out into the universe, you will get back all of it and more, right? Because that's just the way it all works. And a lot of people want to believe that, the law of compensation means that you're going to get paid, in full because the universe is going to compensate you for just being who you are. No, the universe is going to compensate you according to who you are and how you run through your life. And so, whether or not the court systems are going to be your final reckoning, if Miss Oprah Winfrey allegedly did what you have said she did with the taking of your work and then turning it into a multi-million-dollar TV series franchise and not saying, hey, boo girl, here, let me help, let me do this thing right. let me make this right.
right.
I don't know how things come down the line, but karma is real, and nobody, not even Goliath, can kind of sidestep that, right?
Right. True. I believe that. I do.
So yeah, I think you've stood up for the little people, stood up for the indie writer, and again, that is to be commended because most of us would be like, okay, you know what? There's no way I'm gonna get anything done with this whole Oprah situation. So, but not you. And so, thank you for standing up for those rights. And even if it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, I think you have set a precedent for indie authors to say, I can do this. If somebody is infringing on my right, I don't care who they are or how big they are, I
Right.
can do this.
Exactly. Right. Continue to stand firm. And if you know in your heart that you've been infringed upon, your work has been infringed upon, just keep pushing because eventually you get that self fulfillment of knowing that you took every step, the steps necessary, and you continue to stand firm no matter how hard that trial was, or the trial is, or the process is. Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Well, we are here at the end.
Great. That was a great, well, it was good to chat and get it out.
I'm so excited. We made it. Thank you for sharing. Seriously. Thank you so much for sharing. How can the public get in touch with you? How can they follow you and follow what you're doing? Do you have social media, a website?
Yes, I'm still on TikTok. I want to change the name of the company. I'm still on TikTok, and I write I'm reading excerpts from my story, and the book is on Amazon, From the Greenleaf to Greener Pastures, and some of my other, just Google my name, Freda J, and you'll be able to find other books I've written. And it's also, just purchase a book.
Okay, I will make sure that I put the link in the show notes to your TikTok and to your Amazon site.
Appreciate it.
What else do I need to tell you?
Well, you've been great. It's been great chatting with you and to meet with you. We may have to take on another project or do something else different together.
Hope so. Look, I'm getting ready to invite you to do a short story for my anthology that my company's publishing. Please. When everyone kept secrets, that's it. Tell the truth and shame the devil.
That sounds really, 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 really intriguing.
So just let me know. Yeah, just let me know. And if you want to, be included, I know for sure you got stories. Like, because you're from...
Yeah, the Carolina girls, right.
Exactly. All right. I'm going to let you go because I know you have places to be and probably not wanting to be, but stay for a moment.
Okay.
All right. Oh, we have to say goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Black Writer Therapy, where we amplify and celebrate the voices of unapologetic Black women writers. We're proud to be part of the Alive Podcast Network. Be sure to tap into the only Black woman-owned podcast network with its very own proprietary platform and app. When you download the Tap In app, you gain access to nearly 100 Black creative voices. To support Black Writer Therapy, subscribe and choose me as your favorite podcast host. 50% of your subscription fee goes directly to this show and allows me to continue to bring you quality content like this. Until next time, remember, be kindest to yourself first, always, and in all ways. I am Alishon, your host for Black Writer Therapy Podcast.